everybody doing today? My name is Joe Stewart, writer, producer, host of Comic Book Central. You can hear at comicbookcentral.net. That's where I interview individuals who bring comic books to life, and that is what we've been doing all weekend long. In fact, we're celebrating anniversaries on this very stage all weekend long. One of the biggest anniversaries, obviously, 80 years of Batman. Our guest today, he has not only portrayed Batman, but he just wrapped 5 seasons on Gotham. Please give it up for Ben McKenzie.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Couch for our guests. If you need to do any therapy, feel free. Tell me your fears, tell me your dreams, everything you need. So, as we go through, I do want to say, I think we do have. There's always guest appearances on Gotham. You always have guest stars coming in. We're kind of doing the same thing today. I think we do have. Do we have a cameo guest appearance today?
We do. Ladies and gentlemen.
You guys are on the bonus plan today. You weren't expecting that, were you? Maybe you were expecting it.
And she's taking Firefly questions too, guys.
Wow.
So, and there's just a crowd, just a huge crowd. 1,000 people.
We were just talking about that. Like, I mean, just a short-lived, beloved Western too for that, and it's like you're still packing. Yesterday it was unbelievable. So.
Oh. Anybody here from the panel yesterday?
Oh, yeah.
So you can't stay with us the whole time, but we do want to chat. And one of the things I did want to ask your lovely wife about. So you guys can split the mic. You guys can get cozy on the couch.
I'd rather not.
Now,
You can ask her a question. I'm not going to give her the microphone.
Oh, well, it's true that either. Since we spoke on Comic Book Central, you were my first-year guest, so thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. But right after that, so many things happened. You got Gotham right after that, so we'll talk a little bit about Gotham today, obviously. One of the things I wanted to ask you about that I didn't get a chance to, you hadn't had it yet, was The Flash.
Right.
Your time on The Flash. How did you get involved with that project?
They literally called me up one day. I know the showrunner a little bit, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to do the voice of Gideon. They explained what she was. And I was like, sure, why not? It'd be a lot of fun. And then they said, do you want to be credited in the opening credits or not? And I was like, no, don't put my name in there. Let's see if people figure it out.
Okay.
And they did.
I was going to say it didn't take too long for them to
It
figure
actually
out.
took a little bit because I think they altered my voice a little. And
Okay.
she's a computer.
Yeah, you're not the Gideon moving forward, like on Legends and things like that, but basically the early episodes of The Flash. So, I mean, were you just going in and just doing quick reads and then out, or did you get to meet any of the cast?
No, I don't do it on set. I just do it from a sound booth wherever I am.
Yeah.
I just come in and I have the line. They usually have the production already, they've already shot the scenes, and I just come in and do the voice.
And then obviously Deadpool, the Deadpool films too, so coming into that. So what was that? That's a much different experience than
Then I just
Firefly.
came over and took over your panel. And
Really have a go with it. I know she has a 12:30 photo op, so we do want to.
sorry, what was your question?
No, just getting involved in Deadpool. It's such a different experience. And that was almost sort of, just everything had been like really sort of family friendly kind of superheroes up to that point. I think Gotham took it in a little bit different direction, and the Deadpool definitely took it in a different direction. So maybe just talk about the differences between some of the family friendly fare of Firefly and then some of the other darker stuff.
Is Firefly family friendly? I guess it is.
Yeah.
It is.
PG-13 for the movie.
Sure, yeah. I think that people were craving something like Deadpool, right? I mean, just a sort of a reverent superhero who didn't give an F about, offending everybody. Come on, it's all right.
The kids aren't here.
Well, it's not kids, I can see something. My kids, that's true. You should see me on the Firefly panel yesterday. I was dropping F-bombs left and right. Yeah, I think what's great about the movie is it updated what I think is kind of a tired genre. I mean, there are so many of it. It's oversaturated with TV shows and movies, and I think it just livens it up a little bit. And now you've got an option of sort of what kind of show or movie you want to watch.
I want to ask about your writing and directing Gotham. So while we've got both of you here, first of all, congratulations on 5 seasons of Gotham. That was to wrap up the way you both hoped it wrapped up.
I mean, in some senses, the ending was inevitable to a certain degree. I mean, I remember from the first season, Bruno Howler, who created the show, I believe this was his quote. It might have been the Fox president at the time. But it was, because we were trying to frame the show, because as soon as you say it's set in the world of Batman, it's like, great, when are we going to see Batman? And you have to go, actually, you're never going to see him until the very, very end. So the idea was always the very last frame of the very last scene of the very last episode of the show would be the reveal of the actual Batman. Because, spoiler alert, you can't actually show Batman doing anything because DC wants to make millions and billions of dollars on their movie
That was
franchise.
a tricky thing with Smallville too, because they
Yeah.
Tom Welling, like he had to, like the last frame,
Right.
you get the shirt reveal, and then it's over, credits
Right.
roll, and goodbye, and yes.
Yeah. So we always kind of do that part. The jump forward was John Stevens' idea, the showrunner for the last 4 seasons. We decided to do a mustache for just a second. We weren't really sure.
Has that always been the plan?
No, it had been much debated. Bruno had always been, and we'd always been a little skeptical that, like, first of all, we wanted to show progression in the character, so we didn't want to, like, start him as a mustachioed, kind of older detective. We wanted him to be, or older commissioner, we wanted him to start off young, so, buzz the hair and just shake people up, because they'd have to go, oh, that's not the same Jim Gordon, Jim Gordon. Jim or James? I gotta pick one. Jim Gordon that I know. But the time jump forward was John Stevens' idea. I don't know, how did it feel for you?
The mustache?
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say though, you got to write the last episode that we shot. I mean, it wasn't aired in that order, but I feel like for us, you got to tell the story that you wanted to tell.
That's true.
If he had actually had the mustache for the run, how would you felt about Hubby coming home with a mustache?
I don't think we'd be married, would we?
I think we probably knew that answer. So,
The one that she's referring, the episode that she's referring to was the one we shot last, even though it aired
it was like six.
third,
Okay.
six, seven, was the one where we generally got married and Harvey Bullock officiated, and that was really nice because we literally shot the wedding scene as the last scene that we shot right before the show was over, and so everyone was in the scene and we all got to sort of celebrate it, and the cast, crew, everyone got to raise a glass of what I think was actual champagne, and mark it.
Okay, so as far as, because your character arcs, to say the least, go through so many ups and downs over the course of the series, what challenges were there for you as actors, just how to approach that? Because it seemed like their motivation would just be different, almost season to season. It's not even like the same character season to season, especially with your character.
Yeah, you vacillated more, I would say, because Jim had to always be,
Straight
for
arrow.
the most part, a straight arrow, yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to reinvent the show constantly. That's what's so hard about doing it. 5 episodes of anything. 5 years, sorry. 5 seasons, I meant to say, of anything. And yeah, I got to have many different iterations of Lee, which is really fun because playing the same thing over and over again would have gotten really boring. I'm grateful that they allowed her to, because she was so good. She was just such a good person. And it was really nice to get to see her turn. And then when she goes dark, then when she comes back, there's still a little of that in her. She doesn't ever really fully go back to the Lee of season 1. So that was great.
That's the thing I want to ask you about too, is that, did you ever get a script and then look at your character and just go,
That.
wow, really? Is that, like, that's this season?
There was one moment when they had me and Nigma get together. I was like, really, guys? I don't know about that. Like, is that going to be well received? Because he's such an iconic figure and character, and they were just in such different worlds. But then when they did that whole Fight Club thing, and it kind of made sense. And once we started shooting it and getting into it, I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy seeing that different side of Lee.
I guess there's a trust for the writers at some point, but on a show like Gotham, it's just, sometimes it feels like they're making it up during, the season, like how crazy can we get for this coming up season? It's like, how
I'm
can
sure,
we?
as someone who's been in the writer's room, I have no idea what you're talking about. Make it up as we go along. No, the problem with doing a 22 episode serialized show like Gotham, where we early on in the show, the first season, we were trying to do episodes where we'd introduce a villain and then wrap up that villain storyline within one episode. And some other shows do that, but we realized pretty quickly that's not what works for us. We want to have long-running stories, we want to have villains, we want to see their evolution, because the show is as much about the villains as it is about the heroes. And that's the juice, that's what's really fun. That being said, over 22 episodes, it's virtually impossible. I mean, when you're in that room, because I would only really be able to be out there at the beginning, before we even start shooting, when we're just coming up with what the arc for the season's gonna be. And you'd have the first episode, and maybe you'd get the first half of the year, you could sort of like sequence out to some degree, but inevitably somewhere around episode 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, you're just kind of like, where you're gonna get to at the end, but you're kind of just tap dancing and trying to, keep those balls.
Well, you have those plot points, I guess, as the season's laid out. Like you said, you know where you're gonna get to, but you've got 22 episodes to go. I mean, it's such a different world now with Netflix and all streaming services. You get like some shows are 6 episodes. That's the story, and everything can be so much tighter now. So with 22,
I know. I mean, there is absolutely, look, it was never gonna, once we were sold to Fox, and actually I think originally Kevin Riley was running Fox, but had an idea of we were originally working for 16 episodes. We did the pilot, Kevin promptly left, went somewhere else, and the show was successful, so they moved it to 22. There is actually a big difference between 16 and 22, storytelling wise, but I think it is always fascinating. I would have liked to have seen the version of the show, Watchmen is coming out on HBO, and I'm sure they're only doing 10 or less episodes. And when you squeeze it down like that in terms of how much time you have, you can do so much. The storytelling can be so much more inventive and fun because you can jump around, you can play with linearity and time and space. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff, and we just couldn't really do that. So
we talk about the writing and directing, and while I have both of you here, I do want to ask, and it's an interesting challenge because you're directing your spouse, you're directing the mother of your child. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of those challenges? And I would like to find out what the actress thinks of director Ben. And remember, you do have to go home.
Make no mistake, I rule at home. No, we didn't get to work together as a director. One scene, I think. I was not in the first episode that he directed, and then in the second, you did 2 or 3, I can't remember now. 3. I was in the first 2, and then I had one scene, I think, in the last one that you had. So it's really just a moment. It was half a day, probably, and honestly, it was really fun. I enjoyed it. I think Ben's a great director, and I'm not just saying that because I have to go home with him.
Compared to other the directors you have, because this is the first you've done it on Gotham, correct? Just even progressing over, I think you did, was it in over 3 years? It was 1 a year?
yeah, 1 year starting in season 3.
So just even on that level, what difference did you personally see?
Well, it was great to have somebody who knew the show inside out very intimately and who knew all the characters, but who also, he had his frustrations with how some directors directed or how some of the episodes, the writing came out, so he got to address those issues firsthand. And it was really great to watch him be very meticulous about, giving certain characters moments that were missing, or, finding closure where there wasn't any, or like being able to like take his time. Sometimes the directors come in and they're like all about cool shots, and a lot of the character story, which is really the heart of the show. I mean, you've seen this story 1,000 times in many different forms. So what's the point? It's really about creating the moments that feed into the action and make it really cool.
And how does director Ben feel about actors?
She's wonderful. She's wonderful. I have a few notes. No.
Seriously, what's like up there? Or like, do you give notes? Because that's got to be the toughest thing as an actor on the show, directing it. Because at some point you have to go to work.
Well, it'd be interesting and I'm sure at some point, I'll be directing on a show that I'm not on, but because I'm on it, I know everyone really well, it never had to be anything like kind of awkward and formal. It was just kind of like, and this is the way I like to approach it with actors that I have a relationship with. This is just a conversation. You just kind of throw questions out there, and you ask like, hey, what do you think this person? What do you think your character's feeling now? What do you think about this idea, that idea? And I'm an open book. If they don't like it or they don't have a different take, that's totally fine. There are always, of course, there's always rubber meets the road on a TV show, which is you only have so many hours in the day, and you have to shoot it. You have to get it. So we can talk for a little while, and we should, but then we really need to get going. And there's blocking. There's depending on how complicated the scene is. There's certain things that you have to get done, but it was always super smooth with the actors. There was only, I think, there were 1 or 2 scenes in the last episode that I shot that got a little funky, but it was really more of a script issue. And the writer was great. It's just I would invariably get episode, like 16 or whatever of the season, which is right around when the wheels start to fall off, story-wise. And so it was a mixed bag. I'd get some good scripts, and then I'd get a script where I'd be like, how can we justify this happening? And it's always tough when you show up and the actor doesn't necessarily know either, and they're asking you, and you're kind of like,
You gotta have the answers.
well, yeah, although I'm not going to lie to them. I'm going to say, look, this is what I think we're supposed to be going for here. How can we make this plausible?
But as a writer, do you have the option of changing something on the fly, even if it's not an episode that you've written? If you're directing it, do you have
Sure.
the option to go in and go, this line might work a little better? If the actor says,
Sure.
what if I said this?
Yeah,
Or
sure.
that. It's not like a Joss Whedon thing where it's like, you gotta stick to the words that are on the page.
No, I mean, the latitude was extended depending on circumstance, but and I always tried to be very careful, whether I was acting, directing, or writing, acting or directing, don't change things just to change them, right? Change them for a reason, have a justification, really try to stick. The thing that you really can't do is you can't mess up the plot points that are about to happen, right? If you don't hit those plot points, the whole thing's not gonna make sense. So just, be judicious about how you get there. And the other thing, and this is why early on I insisted on table reads for the show, a table read where everyone, before we started shooting the episode, would sit down, with the script there, and we'd all read it. And the writer would be there, or at least be on the phone via conference line, and they can't escape a note. If an actor says at the end of it, I don't understand why I'm doing this or what's going on here, then it will be addressed then. Much better to have it addressed there than when you're shooting and clock's ticking.
Were there challenges of when the day's over and you go home, of trying not to take work home with you, or because I would imagine as the actor thinking forward to the next day, the scene you have to shoot if you're going over lines or so. Can you give us a little idea of Gotham at home?
I think
And that may be its own series right there. That may be the next series.
I think we're both pretty chill about that stuff.
We are, but we talked about stuff a lot, and we would get,
I think it was more like frustration.
It's frustration. We'd be like, the scene. It's like, I don't know, I've said this line 100 times. Like, I gotta change it, But sometimes we would read the scenes, like late at night, put the kids to sleep, like, let's go over tomorrow's work, or
That was the bedtime reading?
It was bedtime reading, or like, how do we make this scene better? We would work on it together.
Okay, that's what I'm curious about. That, like, how do you do that? Because you're going home, what were you trying to work out as far
Well,
as
sometimes,
scenes go?
we had scenes where we knew what they were getting at, but because it's sometimes, and as it goes on around the season, it's a mad rush to get the scripts out. There's a better way to say that line that I'm trying to say, or it's just not feeling like something that would come out of my mouth. Like, how do we improve the speed? Or a lot of times it was about like cutting stuff, just like too much was said, just take stuff out and let it be in subtext. Things like that, and we would just read and bounce it off each other because, why not? You've got the act right there. But then also we, I think in the fourth season, we really didn't work together at all. So then it was more me venting and you venting.
So at that point, were you bouncing idea, like, okay, so no, how would you handle this scene, or how would you, like, I mean, is it almost like an actor's class at that point where you guys are coming together trying to come up with some new things?
Yeah, and I mean that, and I don't mean this in any, neither of us mean this in any disrespect to the scripts, which were almost always great, and always folks always worked really hard on them, right? So you have to be very judicious about like changing anything, but invariably, sometimes the dialogue would feel repetitive because we're playing similar beats, right, over and over and over again. And so it's just trying to find, but that's what actors can be good with, right? It's like we will remember sometimes better than the writers. Like, oh, I literally said this, 2 episodes ago, 3 episodes last season, 2 seasons ago. So how do we?
It's different writers writing each episode.
Sure. So how do we? How do we make that fresh? But that's not that makes a big difference to us, and we believe to the audience. But it doesn't fundamentally, drastically change the nature of the scene structurally, right? All it is changing is the viewer experience, and that's a good fit for us, right? It's a good way for.
I know Morena's gonna have to go to a photo op here shortly, but again, while I have both of you here, favorite moments on Gotham, whether it's, I don't know if it's a scene or an episode or just even an experience with the other actors. Just what are some of your memories of the 5 seasons that you spent in Gotham City?
Yeah,
And finding each other doesn't count. That's not.
And what, each other? Finding each other?
Yeah, that obviously doesn't count. That's obviously the highlight. But.
Yeah. I loved Professor Pig. Like any scene with him. I wasn't in any of them, I don't think. Oh, really? Yeah, that was a great character. That was one of the highlights for me.
Yeah.
And what?
Camera too.
You got a Cameron Monahan played drum, phenomenal. Yeah, I liked it when it got kind of kooky and weird, and we were doing kind of off the beat track kind of stuff. Professor Pig was great. Some of the fight scenes were really fun. I remember, directing for the first time. That was always something I'll remember. There was some wire work that we did in the crime alley where Bruce's parents, get killed. There's, the episode involved him flashing back to that with this sort of sensei figure who was there to lead him on his journey towards being Batman and reminding him of the tragedy. And so that was super fun and yeah.
What was your most challenging moment on the series? The one you just couldn't realize how you got through it.
I mean, I don't know if there was one specific one, but invariably 4, 5, 6, 7 months into shooting a season or 3 seasons, and it's winter.
You're shooting in New York.
In New York, yeah, which was incredible. I mean, what a gift, right? I mean, the show would not have been the same if we had shot it in Toronto or Vancouver or wherever. Gotham should be shot in New York because Gotham is New York, New York is Gotham. But it's really cold and you're really tired, and you just want to go home sometimes.
Do you prefer shooting in LA or do you prefer shooting in New York? Because obviously now your home is in New York there.
I've never really shot a show in LA.
Oh, really?
I've shot 2.
I've shot the guest appearances, like in The Mentalist and How I Met Your Mother, all in LA, but never long term. I've never shot a show long term in Los Angeles. I loved shooting in New York. I think it was awesome. The city, especially in a show like Gotham, is really very much a character in the story. And there's just some beautiful architecture and things you could take advantage of in New York, but also a lot of really cold, dark alleys in the middle of the night, or you did a lot of rooftops, and when it's January and it's 3 a.m., you kind of want to kill yourself. But I thankfully didn't have to do a lot of that. My hardships were mostly emotional ones on the show, having to send him off to jail while I was pregnant with his baby, and I was literally pregnant with our child. And
There's some method acting
losing
right
that child in the show was not fun, and then having you kill my husband, and it was some crazy stuff.
It's almost soap opera, yeah.
It is.
Before we let you go, obviously we're talking about Batman's 80th anniversary this year. Just your thoughts on being such a huge part of the Batman legacy going forward. I mean, do you sense the weight of that at all?
I got off pretty easy on that one. I mean, Lee is a little known character, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, those who are avid comic book fans know who she is, but the general populace, I think, is like, who's that? But I think I'm excited that I got to be a part of a show that I think, you know, is an iconic prequel to the big series. But I will say my favorite Batman will always be Michael Keaton.
Good call. And so you can anniversary too, so I think, do you have a photo op that you have to get to? Is that, yeah, I'm told, so. Thank you for the cameo.
Secrets.
Secrets.
Bye.
That was fun, wasn't it? That was fun. Okay, she's Okay, now you can really tell me what it was like to direct her. Now it's just, shoot teaser, right? Demon, just problematic.
No, it's
How dare you? How dare you?
yeah, okay, great, she's gone. No, it was actually really fun, and it was good. I mean, you know, it's nice to be married to somebody who's also an artist and an actor, and she can, you know, give me her, ask for her opinion and value it, and you know, that's always helpful.
Well, she gets it too. I mean,
Yeah,
she
she
gets
gets it.
kind of all, we're always on
Yeah.
the same page.
Yeah, the hours are weird. They're unpredictable. No, seriously, like the lifestyle can be a little strange, right?
Is it tough with kids then too? I mean,
Yeah,
how
yeah, it's
challenging
tough.
is that?
It's hard, you know. You need a team. We need to have a nanny and our parents around and all kinds of stuff, because you could be working till 3, 4 in the morning, and then your kids are getting up at 6 or 7 because that's when kids get up.
Would you take another series right now, or are you looking at something, because the series is a grind, you're looking at what, 14-hour days maybe?
Yeah.
A lot, and then
Yeah.
especially when you're writing and directing, because then you're you're part of the whole process then at that point.
Right, which is
Really
actually what I want, but I would not do another network TV show, because that's the really killer, is to do it for 9 months straight. It's not super creatively fulfilling, creatively, because it inevitably gets repetitious, right? You're repeating story beats, but yeah, I'm because of directing and writing, I'm now trying to get on that side in terms of like helping create something with a writer, showrunner, that I can direct and be in. So working on that.
Well, this Q&A is called Spotlight on Ben McKenzie, so I do want to go back a little bit in time.
It's literally called Spotlight on Ben McKenzie.
I believe it is.
But there's no spotlight.
There's no technical spot. We can get one for you.
Ironic, yeah.
If we can get one. Okay, so writing, we talk about writing, and that is sort of all in the family for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the writing background of your family?
Sure. My dad's brother, my uncle, Robert Schenken, is a playwright and screenwriter. And that was how I first came to understand that acting was a thing that people could do and make a living. Because I grew up in Texas, my father's a lawyer. My mother actually now writes poetry. She's a published poet, but growing up she was basically a stay-at-home mom. So the first time I experienced the stage and the idea of making a living at what I now do was seeing my uncle's play on Broadway when I was about 12 years old, and that was impactful. I remember it was a 7-hour play. I was 12. And
7 hours?
Yeah. It did not last on Broadway very long.
You don't get the multiple run times, I don't think, with the 7 hours.
No, and that was part of the problem. Is it was one of those things where you'd watch it for 3 hours, take a dinner break, and come back, or you'd watch it on 2 successive days.
Why was it 7 hours? I had to ask. What
It was a massive. It was called the Kentucky Cycle. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It was a good play. It was telling the generational story of Kentucky, which I guess is sort of apropos, I guess, where we are. Kentucky miners. Everything from the settling of Kentucky in the 18th century and before, all the way up through sort of present day.
Okay, so you set me in this time period. I'm curious about this. So we got the writing, interest in writing, interest in plays and things like that. Did you play football at Drew Brees?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Drew and I went to the same middle school, St. Andrews Middle School.
On the field together?
On the field together. We were playing, it sounds kind of funny, we were playing flag football.
Okay.
Yeah. St. Andrews was a private school, and that was what they offered. I had actually played tackle before. Drew didn't start playing tackle until he went to Westlake High School, which is a big high school in Austin, Texas, won a bunch of state championships. So we were at the same school, middle school. He was an incredible athlete, obviously, and just he's truly gifted as a passer, and a lovely guy to boot. And then he went to Westlake High, and I went to Austin High, and they promptly beat the living heck out of us every single year. Yeah.
Did you play wide receiver as well?
Yeah, I was wide receiver
Did
in
you catch a
DB.
pass from Drew Brees?
In middle school, yeah, for sure.
How
Yeah.
cool is that?
Yeah.
To be able to say that.
And then in high school, I watched him as he threw passes behind me and scored touchdowns, and I jumped for balls that would invariably go to receivers and not to me.
Okay, so it seems like a fork in the road here at this point then. So why not sports over, like how did the performing come in? Why did you gravitate toward that?
How good is your eyesight? Are you looking at me right now?
Wide receiver, you don't have to look,
right.
Look,
I
know we do not have tall receivers on the team, so.
I wasn't, I just, I think I got one feeler scholarship offer from a college, like a D2 college, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna frame it. Never gonna go there, but like that's
Okay, so you knew early on that that was not gonna be the group.
Not really, no.
Okay.
No, I loved it. I love football, but it wasn't. It just didn't feel realistic, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I went to a regular university, University of Virginia, and studying poli-sci and economics, and I started doing plays and stuff. Mainly just bored and just wanted to meet girls and stuff.
So you ended up at
The
the Batman
age-old
universe.
reason. I feel like 90% of actors are actors because they wanted to be guys.
They had to do it for some reason. What was the hook though for the act? Like what, was it the instant audience feedback on stage? Was that the sort of the adrenaline rush that just got you going on that?
Yeah, and also, a lot of actors are actually kind of shy, and it's a way of exploring, being someone else, slipping into someone else, and not having to be that yourself. That you can be someone else in order to explore various aspects of your own personality and to understand others' experience.
We're at a comic book convention. You've obviously been in the Batman universe for a little while now, but Iron Man fan growing up?
Oh yeah, I was a big, exactly, you've done your research. Yes, I was a big Iron Man fan growing up, and still am. And
What is it about that character that you sort of locked into?
I don't know, for some reason we had a thick Iron Man book early on. It was like one of the nicest comics that we had. I don't exactly remember how that transpired, but I liked that he was like the coolest version of the billionaire, superhero. Obviously Batman too, but he felt sort of more futuristic in a way, kind of edge of now. And then it was incredible to watch what Robert Downey Jr. did with it. That was kind of talk about perfect casting. Just really pumped up.
You have an affinity for crime-fighting billionaires.
I do.
And you became a crime-fighting billionaire.
I did. Alas, not in real life.
Okay, not in real life, but still, it's, especially in animation with Batman, it's the voice.
Right.
You've got to get the voice right. I'm going to go down and take some questions, but if you can sort of walk us through a little bit of how you approached becoming the Dark Knight and how you just didn't go for the easy thing of going, I'm Batman.
The Batman Year One opportunity to be Bruce Wayne Batman was just kind of fell in my lap. Someone I guess thought it was a good idea. It was fun to try that in a nice, safe, secure environment. It was hard to do though. There's so many iconic Batman voices out there. You don't want to feel like you're doing like a parody of someone else's. So it was fun to just play with it in the booth, and it was great to have Bryan Cranston playing Gordon, and it was really like a good sort of supportive environment.
Is there at any time with your kids that you pull the voice out?
Yeah, I'll pull a deep voice. I've tried to manipulate them into thinking that I'm cool because Gordon is Batman's best friend, as we all know.
That'll work.
I said that to my stepson the other day because he's his best friend. He goes, I said, you know who Batman's best friend is, right? Right? And he was like, Alfred? I was like, no. Well, yes, but there's another one. Yeah.
I thought you might go Robin, so there may be a higher.
Well, Robin, I know, but Robin.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, depends on the version, right? Yeah.
Fair enough. Let's take some audience questions here.
Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Kim.
Hi, Kim.
I wanted to know how you, Ben, are like Jim Gordon and how you are different than Jim Gordon, besides the obvious.
I like Jim's stoicism, his idealism. I would say I have some of that. Perhaps I'm a little bit more. So maybe I'm sort of Jim Gordon a little later on in the show rather than early on. I don't have his. Jim is nothing if not an untiring warrior, and I am not that. I'm definitely much more, human and fallible in that way. But he's somebody to really aspire to, and a great kind of touchstone. And I do occasionally. I would kind of think it would be nice to be more like him. Not the getting punched in the face part, but like the part where he's all heroic and whatnot. Thanks for the question.
Hi, my name is John. I watch all the DC TV shows, and with this year being Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, would you come back as Jim Gordon if you were asked?
Yeah, sure. Under the right circumstances, sure.
Have you been asked?
I have not. I would tell you, I think. I think that those shows tend to exist in their own world because they are now, I assume, nowish, or the future, as opposed to Gotham, which is supposedly the past, in some loosely defined way. So I don't know if there would be an actual crossover, but if asked in the right circumstances, sure, if there's a take. I think it's cool they're putting all those worlds together. I think that's very imaginative and impressive.
Kevin Conroy's coming in as Batman. You could be Batman.
Is he going to be Batman?
He is Batman.
How are they doing that?
He's
I
old
guess
man
we'll
Bruce
find
Wayne.
out.
Old man Bruce Wayne. Cool. Well, he's a great guy. I love him, and his voice work is iconic, so that's awesome.
Hi Ben, my name's Brian. Just had a question in regards to the upcoming Batman films down the line that have Robert Pattinson. Depending on the story of that, if you were asked to be Jim Gordon in that, would you consider it?
Fuck yeah. Sorry for the kids anyway. Yes. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, that sounds cool. I don't really know anything about what I guess probably everyone's seen online. But it sounds cool, and the Joker movie looks amazing. So there's clearly, I think it's good for DC to mix it up and breathe some fresh life into the universe, the Batman universe, and I'm excited to see what they do with it.
You'd have to have the mustache.
Done. Might not be able to go home. Well, this time I'd actually have time to grow it. The problem with the mustache was couldn't be real because we had to go from not having mustache to having mustache overnight, and I have plenty of testosterone, I guarantee you, but I can't do it overnight. So,
Just kind of clear with your significant other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she'll deal with it.
I'm curious. I'm Kathy. Hi, Kathy. I'm curious about the writing process. I mean, you were mentioning the plot points along the series, but also too, early on when some of the characters were just like, how the actors portrayed certain characters, and they became really popular, and fandom was like, oh, we want more of that particular character. I'm talking like Oswald early in the Gotham series, and then leave, and how that storyline kind of progressed a little bit that most people weren't familiar with. So do you see, you have to hit those plot points, but the dailies or whatever, how things are being portrayed or how the fandom is reacting, does that kind of influence a little bit on maybe storyline down the road to still try to hit those plot points?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely one of the things you're focused on in the writer's room is responding to what the fans are responding to and what's working on screen, which is usually pretty straightforward, right? Like what you guys are responding to is what we're responding to. It's not rocket science in that respect. Like, oh, that was really funny or really interesting or really cool, and oof, that was not. We should never do that again. And over time, you have more feedback in order to make those decisions. When you're first starting off a show, you're making it up as you go along, and you don't know what's gonna work until you try it, and you only really sort of figure it out by failing a bunch, by trying a bunch of things, and going, ooh, don't do that again. So by the time I joined the writers' room, which wasn't, I mean, in terms of actually writing scripts, wasn't until season 4, we had plenty of stuff to kind of cull through to know what was gonna work, or what we thought might work and what wouldn't. That's really helpful. And then you just got to adjust as you go along, and that should be the process, right? I mean, no matter what you come up with in the room and you write down, then as soon as you let it out to the rest of the production, then it becomes a collaboration where, you know, you want to hear from the production designers, you want to hear from the cinematographers, from the cast, from the directors, from the, you know, from everyone, and value their input and adjust it, you know, as you see fit.
That sort of was the adjustment from season 1 to season 2 with the tone of the show too, right? Didn't it start off as sort of a 70s New York?
Yeah, and Bruno and I wanted to really do a more noirish cop show with the old school, you know, Falcone, you know, crime family, and kind of the you know, to really make it 1970s New York. Pretty quickly on, I think we realized the audience didn't really want that. That they wanted a much more, you know, much more of an exploration of the iconic villains and heroes. And completely understandable. And quite frankly, it was hard to do the version of the show that I think both Bert and I wanted to do over 22 episodes. So we adjusted. We're also trying to do, like I said earlier, introduce a villain at the beginning of an episode and then, you know, have them exit stage left by the end of the episode. That's pretty much impossible to do if you want to create depth of story. So we got longer arcs and more of an exploration of what the villains were going through.
Hi, my name's Callie, and what's your favorite OC character?
What's my favorite OC character? Seth Cohen. I love Seth. Sweetheart.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I wanted to first off tell you that we have a few different Gotham cast members here in Cincinnati. We have Robin and Maggie and David have been here. I just wanted to commend you for everybody in the cast, one of the nicest casts I've ever met. So thank you for being nice people. The other thing is I wanted to ask you, with one of the strengths of Batman is his rogues gallery, and obviously one of the strengths of Gotham is just the caliber of people they have playing those. But being the good guy that's more of a trying to do what's right, what's it like trying to be the straight man against these really delightfully over-the-top characters?
Yeah, a little frustrating times. We're definitely having more fun. When we were able to play with Jim's, play against his kind of natural, you know, stoic, heroic side, do a Clayface episode or something, that was lots of fun. You know, where you got to basically, I got to pretend to be like a villain for a minute. But yeah, that's kind of what you're signing up for, is to be the straight arrow in a quiver full of wackadoodles. And it was great to see. What was cool was to read a script and have a new villain come in, a new actor, and watch their portrayal. I mean, lots of fun, really fun.
Hi, my name is Ricky. I just wanted to ask you, throughout the series of Gotham and your interaction with all the other actors, which one of them did you feel like you had the most dynamics with? Like, which one did you feel more natural with, like, working with besides your wife?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, Donald Logue and I, like, got along like a house on fire from the word go. He's just a great guy, very intuitive, smart, but just kind of rolls with it. And I think that was, I mean, from my experience of working on the show, that was at the core of it, because that was most of my time was spent with him. And you can't have a good cop show unless you got a good cop partnership. So that was really the most fun that I had. Which is great. He's also hilarious. He's got so many stories. He's a good dude.
If you could remake a cop show, which one would you remake? You're a fan of 70s cop shows, right?
Sure. Starsky and Hutch, man.
That's the one.
That's the correct answer. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caleb.
Hey.
So like, out of all like the other Jim Gordons that have ever been like on TV or in movies, do you have a favorite one that you try to act? Yeah, just kind of like put your acting towards the Gotham series from the movies or TV show?
You know, I didn't want to try to, you know, copy what anyone else was doing. Also because we're seeing him at an earlier point in his life that we've really never seen in a live action setting before. It's always been Commissioner Gordon. But certainly you couldn't help but be influenced by, I mean, honestly, primarily because of like the sort of realistic nature, pseudo-realistic nature of what we're doing. Gary Oldman, you know, in the Batman films he's just a great actor, and he was playing it very straight. He was definitely a man of power who or a leader of men who was, you know, struggling to keep the wolves at bay, needed Batman's help, and so I would, you know, just pay attention to that. That was probably my touch. And the comics too. I mean, that's what you had to do really more than the live action portrayals, is go to, you know, a Gotham Central or even Year One to look back at, all right, what does Detective Gordon look like? Even just like sort of visually and character-wise. Even though we departed from a lot of mythology, like that's definitely was an influence. Inspiration.
Hey Ben, thanks for doing this.
Sure.
I actually really like the movie Junebug. Interested in your perspective, film versus TV. What do you prefer? Pluses, minuses, stuff like that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Junebug is a little film I did. It was my first ever film. Amy Adams got an Academy Award nomination. That was a real labor of love from everyone who did it. We shot over in Winston-Salem, where the writer and director grew up, and I loved it. I mean, they're very different, you know. To be honest with you, a movie like that, a little indie movie, has no money, no resources. You're just there doing it because you love it. It's also a short shoot because it's all Lincoln Forward, so you know, you're shooting it out in about a month. And a TV show like Gotham obviously takes years and years and years and has all this fancy stuff and, you know, fancy trailers and all kinds of fancy equipment and everything like that. So they're really different. Now that I've done both and I've done Gotham, I think I'm definitely ready to have more of these experiences where I get to go off and just play kind of a fun, you know, Johnny Johnston-like character. That's a Junebug reference. So. Yeah, they're different. I'd like to do both. You know.
Time for one more question.
Hi Ben, my name is Drew. I just had a quick question. What was it like going from working on a TV show to doing Johnny Got His Gun? How do you get yourself into that mindset?
Well, thanks. Johnny Got His Gun is based on the book, and it was a guy approached me about just doing the one-man play version of the book, which already existed, and filming it. So it was sort of like doing a one-man play on screen, and we shot it for about $0.05. And it was great. I mean, I needed to be able to perform the entire play as though I was doing it for an audience, and we shot it over the course of a couple of days. You know, what's great about something like that is that you really get to go deep and have that immersive experience that you just don't really ever quite get when you're filming a traditional TV show, because you're doing it in little segments, little chunks. Whereas with Johnny Got His Gun, you're you know, for 8 hours a day for, I think we shot in 2 or 3 days. You needed to be able to do 10-minute chunks at a time. It was really, really fun, and I'll never forget it. So yeah, thanks for the question.
One question I didn't get to ask you. What does Director Ben think of actor Ben?
Just got some notes. It helps you be a better actor to be a director, I think. You don't, not always necessarily. I mean, you different sides of your brain. I think you need to be able to let it loose as an actor occasionally and just try some stuff, throw things against the wall, and not be afraid to fail. Whereas the analytical side of you as a director is trying to get certain pieces and imagining how they fit in editorially in your head, and you know how you're telling the story and all that stuff. That side of it can sometimes, you know, kind of pull you back from the experiential side, make it more cerebral. So I think it makes it better though. It makes you better. It's good to understand what people are doing with the stuff that you're putting on screen, right? And how they're putting it together and how you can help them put it together in a more dynamic way.
What's next for you? More directing, acting? Where are we looking at? What can we expect?
I mean, I'll certainly can still be an actor, and I think what I'm trying to do now is set up some things which are mainly television that are things where I can team up with a writer showrunner and possibly be in them, but direct them as well.
Happy Batman anniversary.
Thank you, sir.
Happy 80 years, and again, congratulations on everything. Everybody, give it up.
Woo!